welcome to The Cynical Developer, explaining why you should bother with the latest and greatest in development technologies. In this episode, we talked to Zac Braddy about ReactJS. So we're joined by Zac Braddy, who's an Australian web developer living and working in Nottingham in the UK. He considers himself to be a full-stack .NET developer with a passion for the front-end technologies. Having had his eye on React for some time, he eventually decided to learn more about it and gave himself a reason by starting up his blog, the Reactionary.net. He quickly became the workplace React evangelist and expert, and he's been working to overhaul the current front end of his employees' application with React and Redux for the past 2 months. So, hi Zac, and welcome to The Cynical Developer.
Hi James, thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah, it's not a problem. We tend to get a lot of UK people on this podcast, being UK based, so this one's a little bit of a twist with an Australian in the UK. So,
very exotic, you know. I thought I'd step out from behind the bar.
Yeah, definitely, and I think you're stepping up there as well with your blog and bringing a lot of good information about this framework. So, if you can sort of explain to me and everyone that's listening, what is ReactJS?
Yeah, certainly. Well, React is a JavaScript. Depending on which you like, framework or library, whichever word you prefer to use. I think a lot of people prefer to call it a library, and it is used to create reactive JavaScript experiences on the web. It's been put out there by Facebook, and it was originally their sort of in-house tech that they used to build Facebook. They then open sourced it, and it's sort of gone from strength to strength from there.
Come from Facebook. Now they're a PHP application, I believe. Does that mean that it only works for that technology?
Well, no. Being JavaScript, it is. With each passing day, JavaScript becomes more and more platform sort of agnostic. You can use JavaScript in any number of ways these days. But React runs mainly in the browser, although it does have the capability to be able to do server-side rendering as well through Node. It's available in any number of sort of platforms and ways to use it.
So it's another JavaScript platform, framework or library. What makes this stand out from a lot of the others that are out there, that like AngularJS, Backbone, and Knockout.js? Are they even comparable? Are they the same thing, or do they achieve different things?
Well, no. React is sort of slightly different to the other ones that you named there, in the fact that React, even on the sort of Facebook website, describes itself as the V in MV star or MVC, whatever you want to call it. It just creates views, and it does that via a technology called the virtual DOM. Which is what sort of makes React cool and fast and the sort of framework that you really want to be talking about, because what the virtual DOM is it's a sort of another DOM, like another representation of the real DOM, and what that's actually used for is to be able to run what they call the smart diffing algorithm over it. And what the smart diffing algorithm is when you make a change, or when the user interacts with your application, or when asynchronous data arrives at your browser or something like that, when the application reacts to some change, then that change is then replicated through to the virtual DOM, and then from there the smart diffing algorithm goes through and sort of works out, okay, which parts of the DOM actually need to change, and these parts are then changed in the virtual DOM. So from there, the virtual DOM then replicates to the real DOM, and I guess the real DOM it replicates to the DOM that's being used by the browser. And the reason why that's so efficient, and because it seems like it's not efficient, it seems counterintuitive, but it's actually really quick, because the virtual DOM has had quite a number of performance tweaks and so forth on it, but also it's then able to aggregate all the changes that need to be made on the DOM, and also and then basically replicate the smallest number of changes from the virtual DOM to the real DOM. So it makes it more efficient because fewer changes are being made to the actual DOM and having to then be repainted. So that's kind of why it's cool, and it's also why it's somewhat different to those other frameworks. Getting back to your original question.
Yeah, sure. So it uses a virtual DOM. Does that give you more functionality than just talking to the regular DOM that the browser's using? You said that it's a lot faster because it's had some performance tweaks on it, but is it comparable? Is it one and the same, or is it just is it an extension of the DOM?
Well, you don't actually interact directly with the virtual DOM. It's sort of React magic. All this happens under the hood. What actually happens in order to be able to kick off that virtual DOM, repaint cycle is whenever you make a change to a React component state. So each component that you create with React has state elements baked into the framework, and you can call the set state function. And in doing that, you then tell React, okay, something's changed in that I may or may not be displaying in my component, and I want you to now repaint into the virtual DOM, and then React does all the rest for you.
Right. So it takes care of all your binding of your data and things like that.
Well, I mean, you still define how your data's bound and so forth. But it does take care of the switching of that. As I said earlier, the reactive experience through JavaScript is being supplied by the ability to be able to repaint that DOM really quickly.
Okay. So on the topic of the DOM is that I believe that AngularJS, at least V2, has a shadow DOM. Is that a very similar thing? Is it the same thing, or is it something different?
So look, I have to admit I don't have a lot of experience with Angular 2. In fact, well, probably I haven't even really done a tutorial on it. All the knowledge I have around Angular 2 is all secondhand. The reason why I never actually sort of investigated Angular 2 is because from everything that I have heard about Angular 2, it is pretty much, as you say, it is taking all the best bits of React and sort of reimagining those. So it's from what I've heard, it's going towards more of a sort of componentized sort of model, and you've got the shadow DOM thing and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I just sort of I made my bets on React, so that's the one that I learned, sort of thing. I did use Angular 1 beforehand, and I used that quite extensively, and I kind of think that with the changes in Angular 2, the future of this whole JavaScript framework battle between Angular and Ember and React and all the rest of them, I feel like there's sort of two big people in the race now, and that would be Angular 2 and React. Only time will tell who's going to win out of that, but I kind of feel like React might have the edge, and that's not just because I started a React blog, but it's more the fact that I think that Angular 2 really runs a risk in the fact that it's changed up the way that you build Angular apps so much, because the risk there is that Angular's got a really heavy buy-in with the industry. No one can deny that. However, when you then propose to those people who are so heavily invested in Angular, hey, do you want to take Angular 2 and you're going to have to rewrite all your apps? And by the way, we're Google, so we're probably going to turn off support for all the Angular 1 stuff, so you better get to it, sort of thing. I think that's going to be something that then causes all those professionals who have built all those Angular apps to think, well, we've been using Angular for a while now, and maybe just going to Angular 2 just because it's the next Angular is not necessarily what we want to do. Maybe we'll go shopping around. Maybe we'll go and look at other things. And I think that's why React and Angular, in my mind, is going to be such a sort of a really close race, because people's minds will be opened by the fact that they're going to have to, by the prospect of having to rewrite all these Angular apps.
Yeah, I can sort of attest to that, as well as the fact that one of the applications that I've built in my day job, the original version is in AngularJS 1.4. And obviously Angular 2's come out. There's been rumour that 1.4 will be dropped for support. So it's been a case of, right, guys, you're going to have to pick this up in Angular 2.
Yeah.
And it's not been that easy for the team to just go, okay, we'll just use Angular 2 and we'll be sorted. It's a whole new ball game. It's a whole new technology. They might as well have called it something else, I think. And that might have helped them. But, yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying.
It was quite scary the way that Google sort of behaved around this sort of period as well, because first of all, I noticed personally that over a couple of their, as far as Semver is concerned, they were non-breaking changes. I found personally in some of the apps that I used that there were breaking changes in some of those non-breaking change version patches, and that was basically explained away by the fact that, we can't go up to version 2 because that's Angular 2. But also I found that in those breaking changes, the way that you fixed it was, I wish I could remember exactly what the problem was, but basically we couldn't go back to the way that it was beforehand because Google had already dropped that version. And when they drop a version, you just can't get a hold of it anymore. So unless you have a copy of it, it's gone.
It's stripped out of the content delivery networks then.
Yeah. So it was. That was kind of scary to see how they conducted themselves in that way, especially seeing as how, as I said, they're now proposing, we're gonna make you write everything in Angular 2. I bet you Angular 1's not going to last long. You know what I mean? Like they'll be getting rid of it. Yeah,
that's. Does seem about right, and I think the changes that went through when it was coming through to Angular 2 before it got released was a bit of a problem, and I know we had issues with the guys trying to learn it, and they were following tutorials, and all of a sudden everything had moved. But that happens when you early adopt something. But anyway, we're talking about React today, we're not here to bash Angular.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
If there is anybody listening that wants to come and talk about Angular and Angular 2, then get in contact, because we'd definitely like to hear the other side of the argument.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you about. Okay, let's stop talking about Angular, and I'll tell you about why. Another reason why I think that React is going to win that race is because React has got a really committed community as well, and a very talented community around it. Now, that's not to say that Angular doesn't, but it's just that I'm part of that community, so I'm aware of the talent pool that's there. And a number of the blokes at Facebook, they're not sitting on their hands. They're moving forward, and they recently announced that they are working on. It's highly experimental at the moment, but they're working on this a reimagining of React, basically called Fiber. And it seems really exciting, but it's at the moment it's really, really complicated, and basically no one understands how it works. But from what I've heard of it, it's the way that I imagine it is basically that Facebook has built this ReactJS, right, and they're using it in house, and then and then they think, oh, this is great. I might just open source this and everyone can enjoy all the goodness, right? But then they release it, and now all of a sudden they realize, oh, well, okay, now we're going to have to maintain this repo, and we can't really make giant changes. We can't just sort of file new this React.js now because everyone's relying on it and everything. So sort of in response to that, it seems like they've kind of gone, right, well, we're going to take all the lessons that we learned from React.js and you can imagine, you look back on code that you wrote 6 to 8 months ago and you kind of go, oh God, who wrote this? Was I drunk? And I think that's kind of what's happened, is the fact that they've looked back and kind of gone, oh, React's really good and it does what we want it to do. But if I was file newing it right now, here's how I would do it. And I think that's what Fiber is intended to be. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Oh, right. Okay. So that they could be coming out with a new framework as well. So we briefly touched on the fact that it's made by Facebook. It's not just for PHP, but we can use it on the front end and the back end. So that means that I can use it with .NET, with MVC. Does it replace some of the stuff that's in there? Because MVC.NET or ASP.NET MVC has views and partial views, and from what little I know about React, that sort of has that built into the into it really.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a framework called React.net, which is it's designed in order for you to be able to do exactly what you're talking about. Use React within Razor views. It gives you all syntax and so forth, so that you can, it's just extra Razor syntax that you can then use to be able to create your React components. And I mean, I haven't used it in anger, but I've sort of had a quick look at it. I have to say though, it might not be the most popular opinion, but using React with MVC or ASP.NET MVC, it's not my favorite way to use React. I think that in doing that, I mean, I feel like I'm missing a trick in doing it that way, because for me, my favorite way to develop applications with React is to make everything that you're building with React its own little thing, have its own little ecosystem. It has, its own build pipelines and all the rest of it. And when I build it, it's a spa, you know what I mean? And that spa then makes API calls, Ajax calls over to whichever web API I've then rolled, if you know what I mean. So yeah, yes, you can use it with ASP.NET MVC if you're that way inclined. But I kind of like it the other way.
Sure. So you're talking about the build process for your React application. Is that done? Are you able to do that through MS Build, or does that have to be done through something like Node to build it, or some other package?
Yeah, well, most of the build things are in Node. So you used to have Grunt, and then everyone decided Gulp was the best thing to go, and then me personally, I kind of decided that I was going to cut away all the complexity and never use a build pipeline again, and just use npm tasks. And now, collectively, our favorite build tool is Webpack. And that's also in Node. So as far as like integrating into your MS Build and all that, well, you just have Node installed on whatever MS Build server that you're going to be on, and it's as simple as kicking off a batch script. And generally, I just get the batch script to then, or my Webpack to compile all the things that I need to compile and drop the files in a folder somewhere. Preferably in the project, and then it's all done for you.
So we can build it one way or another. It's just slightly different to maybe what we're used to, unless we're using some of the other frameworks out there already. So really, it's a way to display all your data for your application that you're getting from your APIs, whichever flavor that they are in. Now, currently, if I was to sit down and build a system, I would probably look at something like Bootstrap and jQuery to build it. Does it play nice with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of what pushed me towards React, and the reason why I like it quite a bit is because you find those other frameworks like Angular and so forth, they tend to be varying shades of opinionated on the way that you should do things. And that's not to say that React doesn't have its own opinions. It certainly does. There's some things that it chooses to do a certain way, and you don't have a choice in the matter. But because the scope of React is so much smaller, because it's only handling the view of your MVC pattern, everything else is kind of left up to you. And that's not to say that you're left out in the cold either. As I say, there is, I guess you could describe it as vibrant React community. And so there's plenty of packages that you can pull down over NPM and they'll help you out, So say, for instance, to give you an example, you've got things like React Router and that does all the routing for you, that is kind of built into Angular, and that's kind of you use their router. So as far as being able to use it with things like Bootstrap and those other things, yeah, absolutely. Mainly because React doesn't really mind. it plays nicely with all that sort of stuff.
That's good. It's something that I think I've had problems in the past with some of the other frameworks that they don't quite like it because they use their own cut down versions of some of those other frameworks, and you get a few conflicts. With some of the other frameworks, you get their own event handling for click events and change events and stuff. Does React give you anything like that at all?
React gives you ways in order to be able to hook into that sort of stuff. Yeah, the basic HTML things like click and change and stuff like that. But I mean, React also allows you to be able to define what are called props. And those props are basically just entry points into your components. So you can define your own things that don't even really need to be traditional handlers. Like you might have I'm struggling to think of a really good example, but the point is that the props they're just JavaScript properties that you can send in. So you can send functions in and have your component execute those functions based on different criteria. So not only I guess what I'm saying is not only do you have the basic handlers, but you can also fairly easily create your own.
So I guess that we would be writing pure JavaScript to work with React. Can I write that in ES6 or TypeScript or anything like that, or is it just JavaScript, or does it have its own way of being worked with?
So I think you'll find that if you ask enough people, that collectively most people's favorite way of being able to write JavaScript is using Webpack along with Babel, in order to be able to convert ES6 code into plain JavaScript. So, I mean, React itself runs as ES5 JavaScript. So, just the same JavaScript that you see running in the browser. However, the React provides a number of ways in order for us to be able to leverage ES6 syntax. Well, I say React allows us to do that. It's actually a plugin for Babel that allows you to be able to do that. And I quite like it because I feel that being able to write in ES6 makes the code far more terse. And the reason for that is that the ES5 version of things, of how React builds its components, is basically, nested function calls. So when you write a component with ES5 syntax, you end up having these functions that are like, well, first of all, the parameters are giant because you end up sending in giant objects and different properties and functions and stuff like that that are all going to go into building that class. And second of all, you end up with nested ones of those. So it becomes a mess to be able to read. I think there's value in knowing what's actually happening in that ES5, but actually writing it is not that much fun. So and ES6 just strips away some of that complexity, makes it a little bit easier to read.
Would I just be writing these in .js files in my application and calling them from the HTML files, or do they come in a different flavour? Have they come up with an own extension or something for them?
No. They I mean, what's actually executed in the browser is all just plain JavaScript. But however, there is another flavor of JavaScript that has been rolled directly by Facebook called JSX. And what JSX is it gives you the ability to be able to write what looks like markup in your JavaScript files.
Yeah, that will be what I've seen that looks a lot like HTML in the markup. And for me, that was a big sort of siren and warning bell going off, saying, "Don't do this. This is a code smell," because something about it screams that it's going to become unmanageable. That you've got this markup in your in your JavaScript.
It gets you right in the separation of concerns, doesn't it?
It does. It definitely does.
It's one of those things that you've heard of the quote, "Give it 5 minutes," and you do just need to give it 5 minutes just to let it settle. Read a few blog posts and so forth, and I think having that understanding of, I was saying earlier, understanding what React looks like when you don't have things like JSX and ES6 makes you understand the value of having that. So the thing about JSX, right, is that that markup is not actually really markup, right? It's what happens is your JSX files, or you can call them JS files, it doesn't really matter. But the point is that they get picked up by Webpack and they go through Babel, and then Babel looks for all that markup and it translates it all back into those ES5 function calls, the nested ones that look horrible and are really difficult to read. And so when you look at what you're trading for what you're getting, you realize that you're actually making a pretty good development decision there, because what you're trading is, oh no, now my JavaScript looks like it's got HTML in it, and what you get is, well, okay, it looks like it's got HTML in it, but I know exactly what that HTML is doing. Like that there's a div and there's a couple of inputs in it, and I can read all that. Whereas if you had the ES5, then what you would have is create element, open parentheses, apostrophe div, apostrophe sort of thing. It becomes far more difficult for you to be able to grok what's happening there. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. That was something I was thinking about then, is that some of the other frameworks you can declare with HTML as a string as such, but you can also use the create elements, and I think I've done something like that myself in TypeScript when I was having a play with that. Do you have to do it in this markup-esque language, or can you do it in a more strongly named way?
No, absolutely. You can use just plain JavaScript and just do all your function calls and everything. If you spent time and read some blog posts and you gave it 5 minutes and then you still decided to do the function calls, then I think if you spent 6 months building React apps like that, I think I'd find you using JSX after that.
Right.
Because I know it's grating, but I just feel like you're missing a trick if you're not using it, because it's as I say, yes, okay, so it goes against the separation of concerns and all that. But development's all about making trade-offs. And if you can make a trade-off for being able to have something readable, that equals maintainable. And you'll find it hard to argue that. You know what I mean? Like you can't really argue against that because if you can hand your component over to someone else and they can easily understand what you've written there, then all of a sudden that separation of concerns thing, maybe it's not that important. So yeah, that's what I would say to that.
So with this, if I was to do it with MVC, ASP.NET MVC, as an example, I would have a controller and I would have some views and maybe partial views, and those partial views would be my little controls on the page that maybe spoke to some of my controller methods. So you're componentizing every element on the page. Can you do that with React, or do you have to have everything in a set library? Does it all have to come under a certain namespace type thing or anything like that?
It's so yeah, you can build different components, and there's not really a namespacing as such. I mean, you build it in a similar way as what you would build Angular, in the fact that it's you whack Angular on the top of the page, and then you speak to Angular and you make Angular do things. It's the same sort of thing with React, in the fact that you build your components and you define them, and then they sit on the page and they do what you tell them to do. So I think if what you're asking is would I then start putting the JSX in amongst the HTML and stuff? No, that's not really what React's doing. That HTML gets translated into function calls, which then are called into React, and then React then is able to sort of parse that HTML, if you know what I mean. So you wouldn't actually just put JSX in amongst the HTML. It doesn't work the other way.
Right. Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. That sort of clears that up. So React does quite a lot. Are there any applications that I wouldn't use it for? Is there something that a project that you would look at and say this is definitely for it because it's a certain type of project? Does it have to be a SPA application? Can it be bigger than that? If I wanted to build maybe an enterprise type application, does it work for those sort of things? I know there's a lot of questions all in that one question, but where would you use it and where wouldn't you use it? Probably is the shorter version of that.
Right. It depends. Next question. No, it's so I don't think that that really there are any sort of constraints around using React. You just need to make a judgment call as to whether you think it fits well in your stack. Because I mean, I know React. You're saying React does quite a lot, but I think what React itself actually does is actually not that much. It's just the fact that it plays well with so many other pieces that it sort of appears that it does a lot. So is React right for your application? Well, you'll answer that question better than I will ever be able to. But can it be right for your application? Well, yeah, it probably can, because there's a lot of different applications it can be right for, depending on the other pieces of technology you choose to use around it.
You were talking about earlier that it's designed really to work with APIs and things. What support is there for security on the React side? Because if you're opening up a REST service to your data, you don't want too much given away on how your security works in your JavaScript file that's sat on the browser side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have to remember that the React's scope ends at the view. So as far as how things interact with the back end and all that, I mean, even how things interact with the back end is not React's responsibility. Because you would use a library like Fetch or you might just use jQuery Ajax calls or something like that, and that's what's responsible for making those calls. React, its job is just for it to be able to manage what's being rendered to the page to your user. And by Jingoes does it do it well, but but that's all it does.
As we've just briefly mentioned there at the end, is that ReactJS is there as a view helper, helps you display what you want on your page, and does that through functionality in JS or JSX files, and gives you a better managed way of doing it, and componentizes it a little bit more than some of the other frameworks out there. And it's not as big. It doesn't try to do everything like some of the other frameworks do, and it doesn't take over everything about your application and dictate to you exactly how you're going to do certain things and which technologies you can and can't use with it. So I think from that point of view, I think it's got some very, very good points, and it's definitely something I'm going to go away and have a little bit more of a look into. If I wanted to learn some more about React and I wanted to start building with it, do you have any suggestions about websites that are any good, any training courses or anything like that maybe you've looked at that would help our listeners and maybe myself?
Yeah, I was going to say I've got this website bookmarked. It's the reactionary.net. So I've done some tutorials on there in the form of blog posts. There should be a link on there that lists them all out. The blog posts I have done have been with the aim of there's a lot of content in them. I'm really trying to give the reader a deep grok of what's going on in React. If React was something that you wanted to become really, really good at, then that's a good place to go. If you just wanted to pick up React really quickly, I did the Code School React course. I really like that Code School website. It's the people who have affiliated themselves with Pluralsight. They've got one on there, and I really like their courses because it's kind of like they're the sort of things that you can sit down on a Friday night, and if you don't want to waste your time watching a movie, but you don't really feel like reading a technical book, you can sort of sit down, and they're quite entertaining and stuff. And I think that only lasts like 2.5 hours or something. So that's a quick way to go and pick up React. As far as, I don't want to sound like I'm not wearing my Pluralsight t-shirt or anything, but Pluralsight's got some good courses on there. In particular, the one with Corey House, he does one with React and Redux, and that's really good. And I've actually just finished a book. I haven't written the book. I read it.
Nice save there.
Yeah. It's called ReactJS Essentials by Artemi Fido. I'm gonna butcher his name, but
yeah,
it's the first. It's the first hit when you search for React.js on Amazon, and I'm just written a book review that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks on my site. So, but I think that's a really good way of picking up React.js really quickly because it's only about 200 pages long. He builds a little application that interfaces with Twitter, the Twitter APIs and stuff. So you feel like you're building a real application, which is cool.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a cool book too.
Yeah. We're coming up to Christmas at the moment, so I might have to add that to my list for Santa Claus. If I've been a good enough boy, I might get that one.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I shall include some links in the show notes to the websites, to the Code School website, and to Zac's page. So you guys can all go and check it out and give him some props and tell him what a good job he's doing, because he really, really doesn't take that praise very well. So it'd be good for him.
All right. So thanks very much for having me, James.
Yeah, not a problem, and thanks for coming on. You've been a great help and a great guest. Thanks.
Cheers.
The show notes and any resource links for this episode can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com.